So, speaking of health, you said you're a wellness nerd. Can you talk about your health journey just for listeners and give us some insight into why you are that way?
Absolutely. I'll just say, first of all, I come from a family of physicians. So I think there's something ingrained in me that's like really fascinated about the human body and how to optimize it. My health journey started with some pretty serious chronic digestive issues around age 12. I was dealing with a lot of stress at home and I kind of internalized all of that. And I got a bleeding ulcer. I had GERD, which is like esophageal reflux. And when I went to a GI doctor who was a friend of my family's, physicians tend to know each other and kind of refer each other to their friends. I was given really powerful acid blocking drugs called PPIs, which I needed at the time. I absolutely needed them because I was in a lot of pain and
And you
discomfort.
were
And
12?
I was 12. Yeah. My
Yeah, that's a
dad,
lot.
just for a little bit of context, my dad was a neurosurgeon and he actually was battling a terminal neurological disease called ALS. For anyone who's familiar with ALS, it's not very well known, but you might remember it from the Ice Bucket Challenge a few years ago. It's a terminal degenerative neurological disease and he decided to go on life support when he lost the ability to breathe on his own. And so he was on a breathing machine in our home for 4.5 years during my childhood. So we had a really close relationship. I cared for him. I was very hands-on. And you can imagine it's a very traumatic thing to witness someone you love going through that and very stressful. So that was the start of a lot of my physical struggles with gut health, and then the over prescription of certain medications that in the long run made my condition so much worse.
So
So
much
something that I
worse.
found out was that, my GI doctor had prescribed the PPIs, the acid blocking drugs, which I needed. FDA only approved them, I think, for 8 weeks at a time. And she had told me, you can just keep taking this forever. But I came back a few years later. I was maybe 15 or 16 and said, "Hey, is there anything I can do to my diet to adjust, to help my symptoms, my reflux?" I was eating a typical Oklahoma teenager diet with cheeseburgers and onion rings. And no, maybe just avoid, orange juice or really acidic things. No, there's nothing you can do and just keep taking the drugs.
Wow.
My gut instinct, pun intended, my instinct into how we're, built and designed to thrive, that made no sense, that there were no lifestyle modifications that I could make to improve my symptoms. And so I just thought, I'm gonna take on research. And of course, this was maybe 2000, in the early 2000s, in my adolescence and early teen years, where I was getting books on the Candida diet. And I was reading actual books because there were not resources on the internet then for
Right.
to kind of heal yourself from the inside out. So I quit eating dairy, again, pretty unheard of in Oklahoma, where it's like a side of ranch with everything. And nobody's talking about,
Thousands people this like whole elimination diet I feel like is pretty recent. So you're
yeah,
way ahead of it. And I also find that really interesting that a GI doctor wouldn't bring up food.
I know, I know.
Pricing.
It's actually not even that common today.
Really?
That's what bothers me. I don't know. So long story
Yeah,
short,
that like started a fire and like this education piece,
yeah, and
right?
I'm a lifelong learner. I'm super curious. I don't take no for an answer, and I just love digging in and solving problems. So that, I started cooking for myself. I started just doing a lot more research on how to support my gut. And I had been prescribed birth control for heavy periods. That also was not great for my microbiome. I was prescribed tons of antibiotics in my childhood, even for acne for years that I didn't even have. So my gut was getting bombarded on so many sides from all of these medications, wiped out my microbiome. I was not producing stomach acid. So you can imagine every single digestive pathogen that encountered my body, I got. I had H. pylori, I had SIBO, I had parasites, I had candida, like really bad candida.
Wow.
Well, I'm a really driven academic kid and really into the arts and starting to get super interested in fashion design. And, my physical ability was not really matching my, what I wanted to do with my life. And
Yeah.
um,
It's a huge hindrance. You're
totally.
having to deal with all these physical problems and you can't do what you want to do is a growing young adult. That's
Yeah.
tough.
And I didn't know what to eat between having symptoms after eating and then diet culture and, the early 2000s where everyone was on Atkins or
Hmm.
whatever. I was just trying
Yeah.
to navigate what to eat to not be in pain. And so it was a struggle, but fast forward, I mean, it's been like a 20-year journey, honestly, to rebuild, to get rid of all the pathogens, rebuild my gut microbiome. And I'm still working on it. But the good news is I've been virtually symptom free for the last 4 years.
Wow.
Medicine. I found a really fantastic functional medicine provider who knew when to prescribe natural remedies and knew the tests to do and knew when to prescribe pharmaceuticals that were all successful. Meanwhile, I've been prioritizing an unprocessed whole foods diet for the last, I don't know, 15 years. I was paleo and
Yeah.
um, still gluten and dairy and refined sugar free, but I've been able to incorporate some more foods back in, like gluten free grains and some fruit, whereas before I just couldn't tolerate those at all.
So it's like it's a nuanced approach where maybe you take some medication when you need, you adjust your diet. That's really great.
And
Helps
all
you
based on
alleviate.
testing and my provider's experience with all her other patients, which has
Who's
been,
your provider? Is it in the Portland area where you
yes.
are?
So she's a functional doctor. Her name's Cynthia Warden. And
Okay.
yeah, I've been referring a bunch. I found her on a database of functional medicine practitioners.
Oh, neat. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people might have that question because I get that a lot of times people ask me, "Do you have a functional medicine doctor near you, or can you recommend?" It's just not something that people know or have a lot of access to, those types of resources. So you said that you got into fashion as a teenager?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I grew up in Oklahoma City, so I was pretty geographically disadvantaged, I think, for going into that field. But I was one of those teenage girls who, it's a singular passion and dream. It's like wanting to become a pro athlete or something. It's like you have your dream and you're just going to do whatever it takes to get there. And I used to go to Barnes and Noble and get British Vogue and get Italian Vogue, and I just pour over these magazines, and it was an escape for me. It was a beautiful world. It was expressive and artistic. And I just thought, hey, if I'm going to do everything in my power to get into a good fashion design school, whether it's in London or New York. And my dream school was Central St. Martin's in London, and I got in. And I moved to London when I was 18. And
So
that
neat.
So that brings me to my knitwear design focus. It's such a specialized rabbit hole that I fell down at a young age. I got a degree in knitwear design. So I
I
specialize.
didn't realize you could get a degree that's specialized. Why knitwear?
So like I said, I come from a family of physicians. I didn't have anyone around who was like sewing and making things. But my grandmother on my mom's side was English, my Nana, and she knit. She knitted and she taught me how to knit. And it was kind of my first foray into making things. And I also I heard a rumor, you hear all these horror stories about fashion design. Oh, it's so catty and the girls are so mean to each other and it's so
Yeah, for
competitive.
sure.
I heard a rumor that the students in the knitwear program were really nice, and I thought that just sounded great. How about we just be nice to each other? And so
Love
I ended
that.
up, I ended up specializing for my bachelor's degree in knitwear design, and so that incorporated making our own fabric. So instead of just going to a fabric store and buying rolls of fabric and focusing on draping and patterning, you're creating the material yourself on a
Okay.
in a factory like setting. It was
Wow. Okay.
easy and not my favorite part. I was like, what have I done? This is not going to work out. I hate this. But then the financial crisis happened and a lot of the companies that I wanted to work at closed, and it turned out that it was a good thing to specialize in a skill that's not very common in the US. So I moved to New York. I worked for some luxury fashion brands in New York doing knitwear design, which was really fun. And when I say knitwear designs, I mean like sweaters and sweater dresses, maybe a crochet bikini in the summer, but kind of really focusing on that like fully fashioned sweater and sweater dress kind of moment.
Well, I didn't realize it got so segmented. Even within one fashion house, they will have special people working on different fabric types, essentially. That's
Totally.
pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Kind of
Yeah.
like you might specialize in doing outerwear, or you might be, a bag or footwear designer. A knitwear designer is really specific because the fabrication and the production of and the fit of the product is pretty unique.
That's so neat. So you worked in New York for a while and then you spent, I think most of your career was at Nike. Was that next? Or did you do something in
Yes.
between?
I was in the fashion industry doing men's and women's wear opening ceremony, if you remember that brand.
Yeah.
That's where I was when I got the call from a Nike recruiter who said, "Hey, we're recruiting for this new position for footwear design that is going to be a hybrid of design and engineering. So you're going to have to learn textile programming, come out to Portland and design and develop concepts for our most sustainable footwear technology, which is called Flyknit." And I had
Yes.
heard of Flyknit. I think I didn't have any of the shoes, but I'd seen them around. And I just thought, yes, I want to do this. This is going to be so fascinating and interesting. And moved to Portland in 2014. So it's been 10 years now. And I became the first in-house, so at WHQ, World Headquarters, I became the first in-house um, Flyknit, so to speak, materials designer in the inline section of the business, which means kind of like closer to market. So there were a couple folks in the innovation side, but I was the first before they built out a few other folks that were specialists in London. So it was really, really interesting. It was a huge challenge. One of my first projects was LeBron James's first Flyknit shoe. No big deal. I'm just learning, tinkering on the machine, trying to figure out how to program and knit and, presenting my concepts for LeBron, and it all worked out. And that
That
was
sounds like so much fun.
it was really fun. Yeah. Yeah. So meanwhile, I'm so passionate about health and wellness. And, I didn't start a food blog, but I kind of would share my recipes on Instagram. And I'm, you know, still healing from, my digestive conditions while I'm working at Nike and stuff. So there were always like really parallel passions. And,
Yeah.
my sister would be like, just quit and just become a doctor. Like you're just so good at figuring out health stuff. And which kind of brings me to my detoxing my non-toxic journey, so to speak, because
Yeah. So yeah, tell me about how you kind of got into fabrics might be harmful or
I know I'm not even
products or what came
I'm
first.
just like telling you my life story.
No, I love it. I love hearing it. It's so interesting.
Like almost everyone in the wellness space, the non-toxic journey it's not overnight. You're looking at your skincare products, your makeup, your cleaning products, your food. Is my water filter really working? Like you're just kind of doing research, trying things out, and chipping away at your priorities, right? So
Yes,
to put things
absolutely.
into context, in 2010, like I was really focused on the quality of my food. I had cleaned up a lot of my makeup, but I had like platinum bleached hair and I loved my nails, like my acrylic nails. So there were certain things that were like, okay, I'm going to have this be completely non-toxic. And then I have my little areas where maybe I'm okay with a little bit
I
more.
love to hear you say that because I think it brings home a good point for people, which is not to get turned off because you can't give up. You feel like, oh, if I can't give up that one thing, then I'm just not going to do it. It just doesn't work that way in practice. Like it took me forever to find, I'll just remember this, a mascara, for example, that I liked that was clean, that didn't run. And I was like, I'm not giving up my regular mascara and I'm going to walk around like a raccoon. That's just not going to happen. I wasn't there. Maybe there wasn't a product for me. Eventually I did find one, obviously, but like you don't have to give up something that you just feel so attached to immediately in order to have a healthier lifestyle.
Exactly. Because you're making progress, right? In the 80% of your life. And then maybe you are holding on to some things that make you feel like you. Like I don't think if you looked at me, you'd be like, oh, she's like such a crunchy girl who makes all her food from scratch and lives this non-toxic lifestyle. Like you're probably not going to think that. But from acrylics to gels, and then from gels to Dazzle Dry, which is a
Yeah.
really awesome product for anyone who wants to wear nail polish. It's really safe. But then I went to nothing and
Yeah.
I'm
You
happy.
would like bare hands, by the way. If you use nothing, have you heard of bare hands?
I got my mom their gift set for
Oh,
Christmas.
nice.
Such a cute little gifting set.
Yeah, I love that set. Suzanne was on my podcast and she's wonderful. And I
So,
just think she's created a great product for people transitioning from nails, or if you just want to go, if you don't want to wear nail polish at all. It's like a good way for your nails to still look put together. So
Mhm.
I think that's cool you use it too.
Yeah. And so, like you went on a deep dive in your pregnancy on products and
Yes.
ingredients. And I knew that I wanted to start a family. I wasn't sure when, I didn't know how long it was going to take. And I started a preconception wellness journey. So I was looking more at, I got like an EMF blocker for my laptop. So I didn't have my laptop right on my lap. I was looking at
Yeah.
my water filtrations. I was taking prenatal vitamins and things like that. At the time, I hadn't put together the plastic that I was avoiding in for heating up food or storing food was chemically the same as the yoga pants and the leggings I was wearing. I hadn't made that connection yet, even though it was a performance material innovator with multiple patents at Nike. Like I literally didn't connect the two things. I knew they were chemically the same because you can recycle plastic bottles and turn it into material.
Mm.
And I was so proud of that because our program had diverted 1 billion bottles from landfill. So, of course, if you're in product creation, you're super proud to be reducing plastics pollution in the world. But then when it came to our own personal health and my personal health, I hadn't made a connection yet on, okay, if I'm drinking out of this plastic bottle and I can taste the plastic, I can taste it. What does that mean for the yoga pants that I'm wearing all day long?
That's
And
such an important point. I didn't make that connection either. I think so many other people are not making that connection that there is there are clothes and blankets and textiles that we're on our bodies every day that are literally plastic, right? Is that correct?
exactly. They're chemically the same as plastic, PET.
Yeah.
And
Wild.
like, nobody's talking about it because we're also focused on navigating the toxic landscape of food and water and cleaning products. And this is the next frontier. And
Absolutely.
I saw this very clearly in about 2019 when, as part of my job, we were always kind of trying to source more sustainable and natural alternatives. Fortunately for footwear, the durability with natural fibers is kind of a tough one, but I had the opportunity to meet with a family-run mill in northern Italy that had innovated around botanical dyeing, plant dyeing natural fibers, which of course humans have been doing for thousands of years. It's literally how we've all had dyed fabrics, is using plant materials to dye natural fibers, meaning things like cotton or linen or wool or alpaca or cashmere, things that you find in nature, spin into yarn and weave or knit into a fabric. This family, though, they had innovated around not only just a gorgeous color palette, but also they engineered a way to use only plants to fix the dye to the material. So normally
Okay.
eco dye process or plant dye process, you still have to use like an aluminum salt or what's called a mordant. Otherwise, the color will just run. It's called, running or color fastness. When you wash the fabric doesn't have a way to stick to the fiber. This family uses plants to do that, and plants that don't necessarily impart a color. So they have a palette of 232 botanicals that they use to create a certified color fast, which means won't fade with washing palette and I just thought, this is incredible. This is something that should be applied to the baby market because I was thinking about having a child because babies are the most vulnerable to environmental toxins and they're putting everything in their mouths. They're snuggling up to fabrics. They're
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. But before I have a question though. So these dyes obviously are amazing, but can you just for some background let people know what's wrong with the way that most of fabric is being dyed? I think this is something that a lot of people don't know about.
totally. So we've kind of shored a lot of our textile production to countries that don't have the same environmental standards that we do. In the 1970s with the Clean Air Act, people just started to get really fed up with factories dumping their toxic water into waterways in the United States. So one workaround for that, unfortunately, has just been moving the textile dyeing process to countries that just don't have those same standards. And that's the reason why, if you Google it, the second biggest polluter of waterways worldwide is the textile industry. And it's, the chemicals used are harmful to the workers, and they're harmful in the fabrics, and they're harmful for the waterways where the water is dumped out. It's very unregulated. There's a group of dyes called azo dyes that are some of the worst offenders, that are used to especially colors like pink or red or orange. And some of those in that family have been outlawed, but there aren't a lot of international standards for chemicals that are not allowed to be used. And there's a lot of chemicals that mimic those compounds. So if
Okay.
you were to say like, oh, my water bottle's BPA free, okay, great. But what are they using instead? And is it chemically very similar to BPA? The answer is probably yes. So I'm not saying that all dyes are toxic. I'm just saying that there's not a lot of regulation. And especially when it comes to dyeing synthetic fabrics, a synthetic fabric is much harder to dye. If you think about
Interesting.
a cotton or a wool, it's just going to soak up uh what you put on it. It might not last, but with a polyester, it's like it's plastic. So how do you get the dye into it? It takes a
I
lot more
see.
chemicals and just a more
So the
intense.
chemicals potentially are not allowed, let's say in the US, but US manufacturer could still have those chemicals and dyes used in another country and then imported.
So that's, I mean, what I'm saying is like the customs process for inspecting huge containers of materials, like they screen them a little bit, but they're not able to like
Mhm.
really inspect everything.
Yeah.
And that's not a good process in place for testing fabrics. That's why there's some really great certifications you might have heard of, like GOTS or Okotex, where manufacturers are paying a lot of money to have their materials tested just to make sure they're free of harmful substances.
Yeah, but we know, like, I mean, the majority of what's offered, I would say at least 99% is not GOTS certified, or, I mean,
No,
that's rare. That
it's
is like a tiny percentage. I don't even, probably most people haven't even heard of those. I've started looking into this and I've like slowly tried to seek out those types of certifications, but it's definitely not available for everything that I want to buy.
It's basically like the Wild West. That's just the best way I
Okay.
can describe it. I'm not saying that manufacturers are knowingly putting toxic dyes on their fabrics, but it's not just the dye on the fabric. Fabrics are also treated with all kinds of maybe fungicides to keep them from mildewing in shipping containers overseas. Like they're having to be stored for significant periods of times before, especially like boat freight, right? So maybe it's a wrinkle resistant finish, or a just my advice is to avoid performance fabrics that are not natural. There are very few. There's one main natural performance fiber, which is merino. We can get into the benefits on that later, but if you're going to shop online for a button down shirt, avoid an anti wrinkle shirt. Avoid anything that's treated with a secondary chemical spray to make it perform in a certain way, because that is almost, you can just bet that it's going to be a toxic finish.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And so you came across this family that had natural dyeing process and you knew like this is super important. And so I think you had started to talk about babies, which I love this so much. And this especially another reason I'm really happy to talk to you is because this is something that virtually every baby is going to come in contact with. It's potentially harming them. And that's the baby blanket. So can you tell us about that leap that you made from finding the family with the safe dyes to baby blanket?
It was just immediate. I just thought I have to create a baby blanket. And some of my friends in the fashion industry were a little surprised by that. They're like, "You're starting a baby company?" Like I didn't have a, I didn't, I'm not one of these entrepreneurs who had a child and then thought, "Oh, I see this, negative space in the market, or I have this idea for a product." I really, as a knitwear designer and knit design expert, I wanted to create the perfect baby blanket before I could have my own child, but I also wanted to share it with all children. It was really fun to create the supply chain from scratch. And I really started at the top, because it was just me. I was so used to being a cook in a kitchen of so many other cooks creating a product. And I got to choose, okay, I'm going to use my like American based female founded knitwear factory to start with. And we're going to use recycled boxes with algae printed dye. Like, why not? And again, this is probably just the romantic in me, or the one who wanted to go to London at 18 to study fashion. It's like, why not create the best, the safest, the most sustainable, the happiest supply chain where it's fully transparent. We have the highest voluntary standard of animal welfare in the world for our sheep. And
Wow.
just,
So,
yeah, it's really just a celebration. You think about the yarn being botanically dyed in Italy. It's a beautiful story. It's almost like a fairy tale a little bit.
yeah, that you've cherry picked each part of the process. And so the blankets are they made in the US?
So we have shifted to a Romanian factory in the last, I want to say, year. Avita, the owner of the first factory, was so wonderful because as a small brand, you're struggling with minimum order quantities, right? So she was willing to work with me and my small order quantities. Ultimately, I couldn't continue working with her business just due to the cost. So I'm not in the business of trying to sell $500 blankets. Like, I loved the story of Made in America, but unfortunately, it just wasn't
Yeah.
feasible for us to continue. And we're now working with a really fantastic Romanian arm of an Italian headquartered luxury knitwear factory.
Awesome.
And the great news about that is that they have a machine that's wide enough to make adult size blankets. So that's why I was able to launch our adult size line.
Which I am so excited about. This is a random side note, but we moved houses in 2017, and I swear that ever since we moved, I've been looking for a suitable blanket for us to cozy up with on the couch. And I've been looking for something that's I knew I wanted a natural fiber, and I didn't want polyester, because I don't know that much, but I knew it was plastic, and I just wanted something that I could feel good about. I've searched high and low, and I've tried to buy wool blankets, but they're not comfortable. You basically can't find cotton I mean, it was so hard to find a blanket, and I just got yours, came in yesterday, and it literally is perfect. It's soft, it's warm, and it's big, and it's just, I love it so much. But this is essentially what the baby blankets are, correct?
Exactly.
It's
Yes.
just a bigger version.
So many customers say, I want one too. And I had a few custom orders where people bought between 4 and 6 of our baby blankets and had us join them together for their
Wow.
pets. And so my struggle,
Really?
they said, hey, if I buy 4 blankets, one woman bought 4 and then she bought 6 and she had us crochet them together with like a beautiful join edge.
That's amazing. And okay, so here's the other thing about the blankets that I struggle with when I was shopping is I think that there were cotton blankets, but they're not thick and warm.
They're
Like
not
I do, like don't get me wrong, I love cotton and I always want cotton clothes. But for
sure.
blankets, cozy.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, first off, you mentioned like you would shop for wool blankets, but they weren't soft. So, merino wool it comes from a very specialized breed of sheep. And I like to make this analogy to help people understand. You don't go out and talk about like wearing goat hair, right? Where people are like, "Oh, wool, it's so itchy, it's not luxurious." Neither is goat hair, but cashmere is. And cashmere is a really specialized breed of goats, just like merino is a specialized breed of sheep where their hair is several times finer than the diameter of a hair of rough wool. So it feels completely different, right? It's super soft
Okay.
and it's cozy, but it also is a thermoregulator, meaning that it doesn't trap heat like cashmere does. It actually can hold, like, I think it's, oh, I wish I could remember the number off the top of my head, but it can hold many times its own weight in moisture before it feels wet. So it actively wicks away sweat and expels excess heat, which brings me to my next point as to why it's dermatologically tested and proven to reduce eczema symptoms. So it's a therapeutic fabric for skincare and it's a therapeutic fabric for sleep issues because we know that sleep temperature, ambient temperature, is one of the main reasons why folks are, having issues struggling to fall asleep. And we want to feel cozy and warm and cuddly, but we don't want to feel too hot. And for those reasons, our blanket is the first FSA and HSA eligible blanket in the world. This
Really?
last week. We haven't really messaged.
That's so neat.
So if you have eczema or you have sleep issues, you can use your FSA and HSA benefits to purchase one of our blankets.
That is so neat.
I'm so excited.
Love I love that. And I hear from so many people that have, they're trying different products because their babies or their young kids struggle with skin issues. I feel like it's a problem. It's a pretty common thing that I hear from people. And sometimes, I recommend switching detergent if you have any kind of skin issues, but it makes sense that the fabric is a big part of that as well. And
Yeah.
especially babies are constantly wrapped up in blankets. I mean, mine were. I think all
It's
babies are.
because I had no idea what chronic severe eczema was like before having a child. And it has been the most humbling experience having a child with severe eczema because we were
Wow.
doing all the things right. I had already detoxed all of our skincare. We were never using a fragrance detergent. I wish that it was as easy as that. Oh, we're using Tide. I'm going to use a non-toxic version and her eczema will just go away. I was already gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar and soy-free when I was pregnant. She was born vaginally without any medication. She has never taken an antibiotic in her life, and she's almost 4 years old. She was exclusively breastfed, and then she was breastfed until she was 2.5. She still has eczema. It's still a struggle. So, like, it is wild. And I've listened
That
to
is
some
wild.
experts on it, and just like in integrative and holistic medicine, it goes back to the gut. So she inherited my microbiome, right? So there's still issues there. So we're supplementing her with probiotics, of course, but it's like about finding the right one and the one that's going to build up the good bacteria for this
Yeah, it's so
perfect.
complicated.
So complicated. So
Last thing you need is a
yeah, the last thing you need is a polyester faux fur blanket. Why are all of the blankets faux fur? Have you noticed this? Every brand has.
yeah, they are.
My husband
They are.
has two of them from Restoration Hardware from like his bachelor pad, and I'm just like, finally, I can get rid of them.
Now you can.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's true. So I think that's what everybody wanted, that cozy feeling. And so every brand just made their version of it, right?
exactly. It's an endocrine disruptor. It's a known skin irritant. It's a petroleum-based product. The dyes are toxic, and there's
You're putting out.
I mean, women especially who are doing all this work, switching over to branch basics and cleaning up their water, and then they're cuddling up with this polyester blanket. So I'm really, really happy and excited to share this product with the world.
Yes, I love it.
It's really
Yeah.
important to me in kind of sharing this information with folks to empower people to make informed decisions. And like we talked about earlier in our chat, do with that what you will. If you're not ready to detox your closet now, maybe just look at a few key items. Maybe it's um,
Mhm.
peeling off your yoga pants after your workout instead of wearing them all day. Or maybe it's finding a brand that makes 95% cotton, 5% stretch leggings. And that's what I've
Yeah,
done recently.
it's such good advice. And also I think it's empowering to have this kind of option. Like I said, when I was looking for a blanket, I did not have this option, and to have it, and just the next time you go to buy something, or even the next time you give a gift to someone with a new baby, I would feel so good about giving a luxury and safe item. And speaking about fabric, so you mentioned polyester. Is there anything else that we should be avoiding on the label when we're buying?
So acrylic is also a petroleum-based product. So
Okay.
this also makes me sad when you think about the grandmas that are wanting to knit their children. And my nana was a
Yeah.
knitwear. She would be knitting huge throw blankets for us. I mean, obviously this is like an ode to her, right? She would knit these huge Afghans for the family. They were acrylic. So if you go to a yarn store, a craft store, the big box craft stores, 95% of the yarns, and they're so fluffy and they're marketed for babies and they feel really soft, they're all polyester or acrylic. So I'd say, for your crafters, home knitters, check your yarns, maybe consider looking at that. Obviously,
Okay.
the softer animal fibers are more expensive, right? That's just that's just the reality. And I'm also a big proponent of just buying less
Yeah.
and buying better quality. With the FSA HSA eligibility, I'm so excited about that because it makes our products more accessible to
Absolutely.
Different
I'm
folks.
all for buying less, and that's just a theme that keeps coming up for
Really.
my personal non-toxic journey. I use so fewer products than I did before I started. You realize what you don't need, and I think we just are marketed so many products in excess. It's
It's,
absurd, really.
I was so shocked at how many people gifted me baby blankets when we had our daughter. Own a
Yeah.
baby blanket company. Like
Still,
I would
oh, so this was even post, that's right, post starting the
blankets.
business.
It was an avalanche of blankets that were not particularly cheap. They were, an embroidered Pottery Barn one here, a Pendleton one there. You know, we don't need all of these blankets. Maybe we need one or two. And we have a blog post on our site of how many blankets do I really need? Because there's swaddles and there's, receiving
Yeah.
and all this, but we really don't need a lot. Maybe just one or
Which
two.
brings me to this thought. The blankets are supposed to stay clean long, like you don't need to be washing it all the time. Is
No,
that true?
it's true. So our blankets are naturally stain resistant. So
Okay.
they're hydrophobic, to teach you a vocab word for today. So merino wool is hydrophobic, meaning it naturally repels water and stains. It also is coated with lanolin, which is a similar component to our own skin.
Yeah.
And this is what I love, is because it's a natural performance fabric engineered by Mother Nature, no chemical coatings. So it's just the inherent properties of the merino hair that make it stain resistant, smell resistant, flame resistant. This is wild.
Oh, people don't
It
know this. Yes.
literally will not
Flame
ignite.
resistant.
It won't ignite.
Gosh,
Um,
that's so cool because I wrote a blog post a long time ago and it was actually one of the best or most viewed blog posts, and it was about how baby clothes have to be flame resistant. It's like part of an antiquated law because there were candles being used back then and things would easily catch fire and kids wore these billowy night clothes, and so the clothes are all coated with flame retardants. They have to be, or they have to be snug fitting, and it's just this big scam in my opinion. And
1000.
so the fact that you can have something that's flame resistant that's not coated with these harmful flame retardants is wonderful, and it's so applicable to baby blankets and blankets that you would cuddle up with and use, like heavy use items, because the whole family's using them and we're using it daily, and it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't get dirty
Doesn't get dirty.
easily.
It really doesn't. So
Yeah.
you can hand wash or dry clean if you're intimidated by hand washing once a year, less than that. I have customers who say, I've actually never washed my baby's blanket and it's like still really clean. So it's
Nice.
not like a cotton
Yeah.
blanket that just absorbs every stain and you have to wash it weekly.
Right.
If your baby drools or milk spills, babies are really messy.
Yeah.
You can spot clean with a damp cloth, and then the fabric actually stays clean thanks to the properties of merino.
That's awesome. I imagine that was a big selling point for like this topic I wanted to bring up, which is you were on Shark Tank. I think that is the coolest thing. And I would love to hear about what it was like being on Shark Tank.
It was wild. I mean, going into it that it's going to be a super intense experience, but I don't think anything really prepares the person for like walking out into the tank. And
Were they really just like throwing the questions at you, like one after the other, like hardcore as it seems on the
yes,
show?
absolutely. It's a 45-minute Q&A session, so they edit it down to about 8 minutes or so per entrepreneur. So they're interrupting each
Okay.
other, they're talking over each other, and just, yeah, definitely
So
pummeling.
all that is real. It's
Oh,
not exaggerated. Like that is how it is.
I my film date was on Father's Day on a Sunday, and I went dead last. So you can imagine it was such a tough crowd. They wanted to go home, they wanted to be with their families. I heard them cheering before I walked out. Last pitch of the day. They were done. And then I had to go out. And I have this
And
amazing
charm them. And you did.
um, and explain the value proposition of an incredibly high performance, natural, sustainable product that comes at a price that they don't like. So the sharks are not known for investing in sustainable buy less, buy more. They're not a buy less, buy more type
Yeah,
crew.
I actually, I've never seen someone go in with like a pitch that was all about sustainability.
It
I mean,
doesn't
did you
have,
lead with that or did you lead with the for performance aspect of like it being naturally having these properties?
yes. And I did. So the BTS of my film day, here's the BTS. It was my first 8 hour day away from my daughter, who is 2.5. Since the pandemic, I've been a stay-at-home mom and I have been trying to, growing my business, my passion project in the free time that I have, which parents know is not really a thing. It's not as if I have, full-time childcare and I'm going, working on the business. I'm working on it while I'm raising her. And my husband, bless him, has always believed in me and my passion and has made it a reality for me to be able to do this and grow my business. So I feel really grateful for that. But it was the first time, and she was still nursing, actually. It was the first time we'd been separated for a full workday. And anyway, I just wanted to share that because I think as a mom, it's an BTS because you could watch the show and just think, oh, how is she doing this or that? And you're not seeing the behind the scenes of my mom had to fly in to cover because my husband had to leave for a work trip it was just so much
Wow.
coordination. Anyway, so I'm going in with this expensive raw material product, right? The sharks love a cheap, it's just true. I hate to say it. I'm not trying to put anyone down. They love a high margin, cheap product that they can sell hundreds of thousands of units of. And I came in with a meticulously researched and like exquisitely crafted, expensive product. And so I had a lot of data behind the fact that parents are actually investing more in products that perform and that are safe. And, younger millennials and even Gen Z are really, really starting to get a lot more passionate about non-toxic products and safe products. So
Definitely.
I had to essentially explain the problem, plastics in our fabrics, while I'm also sharing the solution with them. And Mr. Wonderful,
Right, which
he
is a
got it.
big job because a lot of people don't fully appreciate and understand the problem with the way that most of what's given to us is made and that
Exactly.
it's toxic.
So
It's a big job.
so Kevin obviously is like the mean one. So I'm not expecting to have a connection with him in the tank. I'm expecting Mark to be interested because
Okay.
I got a tip that his son has eczema. And I
Oh,
randomly watched this really early episode where he invested in an eczema skincare line because of his son. And I was like, ding, 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 here's a connection. We're
yeah.
gonna talk about this.
Yeah.
Or I thought Emma Greed might be really into it because we have the same London fashion design background. I was like, ooh, Emma Greed and I are gonna
Oh, yeah. So you had like some good options here.
it was just as much of a surprise to me as it was to maybe Kevin invested because he started to get it. And
What do you think got him?
when I was reflecting on the Q&A and I'm telling the sharks, I'm saying, the most common fabrication out there for babies is plastic, it's polyester. And Kevin's all, why is that? And he answered his own question, he said, cost. I'm like, absolutely, it's dirt cheap to make a polyester fleece fabric. And so he
Yeah.
started to get it. And he obviously plays a character that is really harsh and he's obviously doesn't have a lot of tact. But I come from the fashion industry. You can't hurt my feelings. What are you going to say to me that's going to hurt my feelings? I have a very thick skin. I've been standing in fittings with, creative directors and I've had all kinds of things said to me. So I wasn't afraid of having my feelings hurt, but I wanted to make a deal. I want to become a household name and to start a brand, a direct to consumer e-commerce brand from scratch as one person who's a mom without a marketing budget. I mean, how are you getting in
Mhm.
front of customers? Like people say,
It's
oh, an Instagram giveaway is not enough to build a household name brand. You like most direct to consumer companies are spending tens of thousands monthly just for brand awareness. And so when I went
I
into the
think that a lot of people don't understand that. They think that like if you have this amazing product and you get on social media and talk about it, it's just going to go viral and like you're going to sell out. And that's not the reality. Although like having an Instagram presence in my community and my app, I do think there's so much value into the organic piece of it, but I think like you're saying to take it to the next level is just It's almost impossible, I would think, without some sort of marketing budget. Would you agree?
It's not an overnight sensation. And then even if you do go viral, you might have a lot of angry customers who are not getting their orders fulfilled because you don't have the inventory. So it's a balance.
Oh.
It's a balance. I think I just my confidence in going into the tank was that I had science backed benefits. And Sony legal team, so the producers of the show, you can't go on a soapbox on Shark Tank and just say a bunch of stuff about your product that's not true. You have to
Okay.
actually prepare the legal team with a lot of research showing that the claims that you're making are true, which is really
That's
great.
good to know.
Otherwise, you'd
Yeah.
have people up there in front of 4 million live viewers just saying whatever they want about their product. The benefits are so many that it's hard to message all of those, even on like a hang tag. It's just so many things that it can do. And
That's difficult.
yeah, it was really fun. I'm so grateful for the opportunity. It was wild. I was
Really.
nervous. It was like an out of body experience. I wanted to feel grounded, but felt like I was like floating up here. Um,
Yeah. And so, how has it been post Shark Tank?
It's been great. It's wonderful to have. So, Kevin's group of businesses that he's invested in, it's like a family. We're all on a group chat on WhatsApp, and everyone is so helpful for each other. Anyone who has questions on just entrepreneurial life, and they like to host a little get together once a year. And it's just as much help from, I think, the other founders who are like living on, the entrepreneurial life every day as Kevin and his management team is. So it's been wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And now you can really expand your reach.
Yeah, and Kevin personally has been really interested and excited for the adult blanket launch. So I think he
It's
called
going to be
himself
great.
like for big babies like myself. And that was actually one thing that they mentioned in the tank was like, they were all like, I want one for me. And so I was like, okay, I need to.
Yeah, I love that. And you did it. And here you are. Well, I wanted to ask you one last question as we wrap up. Really just to give a takeaway, I guess, for the audience. I love hearing about your blankets, and I hope that everybody goes and tries them. But just to walk away with some knowledge, new knowledge, or an educational piece that they can like start doing today to make better purchase decisions.
Absolutely. I love this question because I really feel passionate about empowering people to make informed decisions. So I would say prioritize natural fibers wherever you can, starting at the base layer of your body. What's against your skin? Your underwear, maybe your bra, your sports bra, what you're working out in, and then what you're sleeping in, because we all know we spend a third of our lives in bed, essentially sleeping. And when I say
Yeah,
natural fiber, here is an unlock for understanding what a natural fiber is. A natural fiber has to exist in nature in its fiber state. So cotton, you think of a fluffy cotton ball, you think of the hair of a soft animal or linen, that is its fiber state in nature. So things like polyester, acrylic, viscose, bamboo, those are actually synthetic fibers because bamboo does not exist in nature in its fiber state. It has to get broken down by a chemical solvent slurry to soften up into a pulp that's then extruded. So it's still a synthetic fiber. So natural fiber exists in nature in its fiber state. Start at the base layer of your
got
body,
it.
what is closest to your body for the longest period of time, and then work outward as you see fit, as what works for you and your budget and your family.
Awesome. Those are great tips. Thank you so much for joining me. I think everybody is going to walk away from this conversation informed, and it was really enjoyable. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrea. This was really fun.